morning. Good morning.
How are you? You're so
All
sweet.
right.
You look so beautiful.
Thank you. I'm just so happy to have this invitation.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Well, I want to thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview with me. So, I wanted to start with where you were born and when you were born.
Okay, I was born in the state of Alabama, a little small village called Furman, Alabama.
Furman, okay.
And the year was 1932. That was a good year. It was Gladys Wicker came in the world.
So, did you grow up there?
No, my parents moved to Pensacola when I was about 3.
Okay.
And
What brought them to Pensacola?
Pensacola,
Florida?
My father wanted to get away from the farm. He wanted his children to grow up in the city and have a city life. And so he came to Pensacola and found a job and sent back for my mom and me. It was just, I was the only child that she had at that time.
Oh, wow.
And so we came to Pensacola. And my father, at that time, he was a longshoreman. He worked on the waterfront.
Oh, wow. So that was a pretty decent salary.
Yes. And later on, he got a job at the Naval Air Station. And from there, he went to the railroad. So he was a railroad man. Mm-hmm. And every so often, he would go back to Alabama because he worked for the railroad, and he could get a free ride. And he would always he called me Little Chief. And Little Chief, I'm going to Alabama on Saturday. You want to go? I said, yes, sir. Well, I would always say yes because I wanted to ride the train.
That had to be fascinating when you were, that age to get to ride the train.
Oh, yes. The windows, I wanted to sit by the window.
Right.
And so he would let the window up so I could look out, And I would describe things that I saw. Oh, Dad, look at that big cow, that horse or whatever. And when we get there, well, it wasn't that far from Pensacola.
Right.
But when we got there, it would be night.
Oh, okay.
And no street lights, of course.
Oh, wow.
And my granddad would meet us at the train station with the wagon. We get on. And all that was fascinating to me.
Yeah.
And we would get to the house, and my grandmother would have all of this food cooked up. And so get to the table. And I learned a lot from her because she believed in education. And she would always recite poems. And I would ask her to recite one for me, and she would go on and on and on. And how she would remember all the stuff, I don't know. But when she finished, I would clap my little hands, And she said, well, when you grow up, I want you to make sure that you stay in school. Because when you grow up, the world is going to be a different place. And she would always say that. And I said, yes, ma'am. But I didn't understand at that time what she meant.
Right.
But as I got older, I could see it. Everything was segregated.
Speaking of that, as you were talking, I thought about you being on the train, I guess in 1935 at that time, because you were born in 1932 and you remember traveling when you were 3 and older.
Yes.
Did you remember the effects of the segregation, or do you feel like your father shielded you from that?
I think he did shelter. Well, all of us were sheltered.
Okay.
Because when we started growing up, the elementary school that I went to was a private school at that time. And
you had to pay for it?
You had to pay.
Wow.
But at that time, it was just 50 cents a week. So you know how many years ago that was.
Yes.
And the name of that school was Asbury, Miss Asbury's School.
Okay.
And you learned the alphabets, and then you learned 2 and 3 letter words, and you had to buy your book. Well, it was a little paperback book, and I can't remember how much the book cost, But my mother would tie the money in a handkerchief and pin it on me. And when I got to school, then I would take it, give the money to the teacher, take my handkerchief off and give the money to the teacher.
Wow.
And she would write my name on the book and give it to me. Well, I had learned to read, and I would read the whole book. And when my dad came home, I was crying, and he wanted to know what was wrong.
Oh.
I said, well, I'm tired of that old dog. He said, what dog? I said, the dog in my book. And he said, a dog in your book? What is the dog doing? I said, he's barking, and I've read the whole book, and I'm tired of that, and I want another. And the book was 50 cents. He said, well, all right, Daddy's going to give you another 50 cents. You can go buy another book.
Oh, nice.
But I learned to read, and to this day, I love to read.
How old were you when you learned to read?
About 4.
Wow.
And,
so were your parents able to read? Were they literate?
Oh, yeah.
They were? That's awesome.
Both of them were.
That's a blessing.
And they would always encourage reading, you know. And my dad would stop at they had what they call it, the 5 and dime stores like Cresses and Newberry's, and he would stop there and buy these little paperback books and put them in his overall pocket and have a new book to bring to me. And I'd stay up and I'd read the whole book. And to this day, I love books. And my husband says, well, tell my mother, said, you know, your daughter loves books, and she has books everywhere in the house. So I'm surprised that if I open the oven door, it might be 1 or 2 in the oven. And he would have a big laugh. But he would bring this newspaper home once a week.
Your dad?
And my dad would stop at the newsstand. It was a black newsstand. And they sold magazines and shine shoes there. And they had a man who did some work in photography.
Oh.
And you go there and take pictures. And you get 3 pictures for a quarter.
Oh, wow.
And my dad would get these newspaper, and the newspaper was a black newspaper. And it was called the Pittsburgh Courier. And they shipped those papers in.
Wow.
And he would buy 2, because if he bought 1, we would fight over it. So he would buy 2. And
now these are your siblings?
That's
you
right.
And your siblings would fight
and
over
we'd
it.
fight over the newspaper because it was a black newspaper, and they had stuff in there about famous black people.
Oh.
And so we would make scrapbooks and save the material, so when they had Black History Week, we'd have some information, because you couldn't find it in books. And that's when I read the story about Haile Selassie, who was the Emperor of Ethiopia. It was, the story about him was in one of those newspapers. And I was fascinated because this man was a king, you know. And I said, oh, well, I got excited because I didn't know that we had kings and queens, you know. And but he would bring those papers home. And we would just get excited over the newspapers. And both of them would always encourage us to read, because you have to have an education. And they would drill that into us at home.
Yeah.
And one night, my mother would be the teacher.
Oh.
And the next night, my dad would be the teacher. And after we got grown, I said, Dad, weren't you tired having worked all day, and then you come home and it would be your night to teach? He said, yes, goodness. I said, well, I just thought about that. Everything was inconvenient. There was nobody had a washing machine.
Wow.
You had to wash in the number 3 tub, you know, and everything was done the hard way. And we had a wood stove, and Mother had to cook on that wood stove.
I was going to say, how did you warm your water for washing? How did you warm it?
Yes, you had the warm water. You had, well, our stove was a wood stove, but it had a tank on it.
Okay.
Where you would fill it with water, and as you cook, the water would get hot.
Okay.
And she would use that, and then she had this iron kettle that she kept on the stove all the time, and with water in it. And I said, when I got grown, I said, now, we were poor. We were classified as poor, but I said, well, I'll dress that up just a little bit. We were a little bit above poor, but we were poor.
Where you can pronounce it better, huh?
Yes, we were poor. And I said, but we didn't realize it.
Yeah.
There was always plenty to eat, and my mother was an excellent cook. And she would make these cakes and pies, and every kid, their birthday was special. And she would make this cake, and she'd decorate it and have happy birthday, and she would make the other children who weren't having a birthday to make a birthday card. And you had to cut pictures, you know, put a picture in there, and then for the big lesson, she said, well, you got to think of a verse to write inside. So that was your English right there. But we didn't know that.
So how many children were in your family?
It was 8 of us in all. My mother gave birth to 9, but she and my dad raised and educated 8 children.
Wow.
And so I went to Teachers College, which was Alabama State. It was Alabama State at that time, but since that time, it's Alabama State University now.
Oh, yes, ma'am. Okay.
And my sisters wanted to go to nursing school.
Now, let's dial back for a second. You went to Miss Asbury's school in elementary. Where did you go for middle school and high school, or how was that set up?
Well, from Miss Asbury, I went to, that was private. Okay, then my mother and daddy decided that I was such a nosy child that they were going to send me to public school. And that's when I went to A.M. DeBond School, which is, Gulf Power has bought all of that property, and now where that school was.
Okay.
But I went there from the 1st grade to 6th grade.
Now, was public education considered a higher standard than private? Like, you said that they said that you were so nosy that they sent you to private school. So did they feel like you would flourish better in public school than private? Like, why did they distinguish the difference?
Well, because I wasn't old enough at that time.
Okay.
But Miss Asbury would take you if you was 4 years old, and you had to be 5 or 6 to go to public school.
Okay.
And so when I got a little older, then they let me go into public school, and they put my brother in private school, so he took my spot.
Okay.
But I went to A.M. DeVon from the 1st through the 6th grade, and then I had to go over to Washington Junior and Senior High School.
Okay.
That was from the 7th grade to the 12th. And but
what was your life like during those times? Like the students, what do you remember about school? Comparing to how students relate to each other now, comparing it to then, what do you see as the differences?
There were no behavior problems like they have today, where teachers have to deal with behavior. You know, you can't hardly teach because you got to stop and solve problems, you know. If you did anything, that elementary teacher would write a little note, and she would take a safety pin and pin it on you.
Okay.
And tell you not to take it off until you got home, and your mother would take it off. And she would be explaining to what your behavior was that particular day, something that you did or said or whatever. And then you had to deal with mom and daddy at home. And of course, teachers could spank you then, you know, but now you can't do that. But I went there from 1st through the 6th grade, and then I went over to Washington Senior High, which was 7 through 12. And I loved it there. But we had everything was segregated, so you had all black teachers.
Okay.
Now, there were some excellent black teachers that I had, because when I left Washington High School, I was able to survive in college on the things that those black women and men taught. And I remember quite well some of those teachers. And where they would give white schools brand new books, we always got the leftovers, you know, books that were out of date, pages were torn out, and if you got a new book, you would be so happy to get that new book, and you take it home and make a cover for it.
So you all had hand-me-down books?
Oh, yes.
Wow.
And when they integrated the school, I went to Clubs and Middle School. And
now you said you went to Clubs Middle School. You were a student there?
No, I was teaching at that time
when they integrated. Oh, okay.
I was teaching.
What year was that?
And that was, I think it was 60. I think 69.
69 they integrated.
But anyway,
how long had you been teaching before they integrated?
11 years.
Oh, wow, okay.
And I was at Brown Boys. Now, Brown Boys School had first grade through 7th grade.
Okay.
And I was teaching in 7th grade, but that's not where I started teaching. Mm-hmm. I started working there, and I was teaching the 5th grade. But the principal would move me around every year, and they would tease me about it. Said, all right, Wick, you better pack your luggage because you know Willie's going to move you every year. And so he'd move me from grade to grade.
Yeah.
And I didn't like it, but wherever he said go, you know, I'd pack my stuff and I'd move to another room. And finally, he put me in the 7th grade, and he told me that I had to teach history. Well, I was certified in history.
Okay.
And I said, okay. And I went in there with that history, and I said, well, he put me in here, and I'm going to try to make this room a history laboratory. And so I would give them hand-on things. Now, I could come up with ideas like that, you know.
Yeah.
And I'd have the kids reading history. I said, but I want you to do history, you know.
How did you
learn to make maps and find different countries where all of these people came from that came to America for a better life, and we would go to the map and find it. Well, what kind of food did they eat?
Yeah.
How did they make that clothing and all that? All the Indian tribes that they found here in America when they came. And we would made this big United States map, and okay, well, where were the Cherokees? What state did they come from? And they'd have to find it, and then I'll outline that on their map. I mean, I just had a whole history laboratory, as I say.
Wow.
But then he decided to move me out of history and put me in science. Well, I wasn't certified, and I told him, I said, well, you know, I'm not certified. He said, I know, but you're going to have to get certified. I said, well, I'm going to have to get. He said, yeah, you're going to have to take these workshops, and when they fly these professors up here from Florida State, they would fly them up here. At University of Florida, they would fly them up here to teach these in-service classes.
Okay.
And so that's when I started going to those classes.
So you worked for the Escambia County School District, which was still segregated at that time.
It was still segregated at that time.
But they did allow you all to access the extra information.
Yeah,
or did you have to take a separate class, or how did that work?
They set those classes up and paid those professors to come up here to teach it.
And so everybody
but they were still segregated, though.
How?
They would have those classes at some of the middle schools, because, see, they were taught at night.
Okay.
Some was taught at Warrenton Middle. Some was over here to where the old Washington High School used to be. The Hall Center is there now.
So all of the black teachers would have to go one day, and then all of the non-black teachers would have to go another day?
All black teachers would have a certain day that they would go to those classes.
Wow.
But the professors were white.
Okay.
And so then they decided that they would offer some classes over to Pensacola Junior College. Mm-hmm. But they would fly those people in here and tell you what day that you were supposed to go, and we would go. And I took some of the science classes that way. I took some over to PJC, and I decided to find out where I could get some scholarship money. So I went to my principal, and he said, well, I don't know. I said, but I'm going to find out. He said, I know where that one person that will know. That's Mr. Ivy, who was the principal of Washington High School at the time.
Mr. Ivy, okay.
Mr. Ivy. He said, now, he keeps up with everything. And said, I'm going to go over by his house and see if he knows of any way that you could get back in school. And Uncle Sam would pay for you to go. I said, well, I certainly can't pay for it myself, you know. And he came back that next day with a cardboard box that's stacked up full of stuff. And he said, Mr. Ivy told me to tell you here it is, and you read it and see if anything is in there that you could use. And I took it home, and me and my husband spread it all out on the tables, and we were going through everything. And we picked out the ones that was in science. Because, see, they were paying you so much to go. And you got paid every 2 weeks, just like you were out on a job. And so we picked out 12 of those grants, and we filled out all those papers. And we mailed them, and praying that we would get at least one, you know, one offer. But we got all 12 offers. So now we got all this pile of stuff on the table, and we got this money on the table, what they telling us that we could get. And my husband said, we got to make up our minds because we can't take but one at a time. And he says, California's too far, Texas is too hot, and he would give me an excuse about every one. So when we got to Kalamazoo, he said...
Kalamazoo, Michigan?
Kalamazoo, Michigan. Okay. He said, now I've been there, and it's cool up there in the summertime. And I said, well, don't worry about the weather. How much money are they going to pay us? And he read it off to me, and he said, we're going to get paid every 2 weeks. And I said, well, that sounds mighty good to me.
So tell me this, like, you and your husband were gonna get paid to go and take classes. Now, was this just a certification, or was this gonna?
No,
it's just
this
some information.
was called a master's degree.
Oh, a master's degree.
Use it.
So let's talk about your husband. Where did you guys meet? How did you meet your husband?
I was in my senior year in Washington High School, and he had been in the military. And they had opened up Washington Junior College, because, see, we couldn't go to PJC because it was segregated.
So he was a little older than you?
So he was older than I was.
Like a year or two?
And just 2 years,
2 years older.
And he had gotten out the military, and they had Washington Junior College all set up. But he's enrolled, and he stayed there and took those 2 years. And I said, well, you know, you got 2 more years. I said, you could go to Florida A&M and get those 2. He said, no, I'm going to find me a job. Because, see, I was still in school, too.
So you met him in Washington High School, and you guys just remained friends? What did you do after high school?
After high school, I had planned to go off to school. But my holdup was I didn't have any money. So I wrote to Tuskegee, and I wrote to Alabama State to see if they had a work student program, and both of them had one. But Tuskegee was private institution, and they paid you, but they didn't pay as much as Alabama State was paying. So I chose Alabama State. And you worked in the lunchroom, and you worked in the dormitory, you cleaned the bathrooms or scrubbed the toilets, whatever they told you to do. And they found out that I could cook. So they moved me over in the cafeteria, and I was glad.
So did you have to take out student loans or anything to go to school?
No, they didn't have no student loans then.
Oh.
That's why, you know, they would set up these little programs within the schools themselves. And as a work student, you would, just wherever they sent you. Some people would work in the office if they could type. Well, I could type, but and they found out I could cook, and they sent me over to the cafeteria. And so I would get up in the morning, And some mornings I had to be there at 4:30 and 5 o'clock, but I was there. And go in there and start, because see, you're going to start serving breakfast at 6:30. And whatever they told me to do, I was right there. And they found out that I knew how to make biscuits, and I was in there rolling biscuits. I learned that from my mother. And just make cakes, pound cakes, I could do that. And but I wanted to make a little more money.
Okay.
But I did not write home and tell my mother and daddy that I wanted to move out of the dormitory and into the city. I started looking for me a place, and I found one that was in walking distance. I went to the lady and talked with her, and she said, well, darling, I rent you the room if you can follow all the house rules. I said, ma'am, I don't think you have any rules that I can't follow, because I'm not here to take out homestead exemption. I just want to get out of school. And so she rented me the room, and I paid her, and I packed up my things and called me a taxi, and the taxi took me to the house.
Do you remember how much she charged you to rent a room?
$14 a month.
Wow.
That's what it was.
You did. That's the only thing you had to pay? Did you have to cook or clean?
Oh, we bought our own groceries. Another girl living there too.
Oh, okay.
And we decided that we would share. So whatever the grocery was, I would pay half and she would pay half.
$14 a month?
$14 a month. That's what we paid.
Wow. So was that cheaper than living on campus?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Sure. And then I found a job while I was, living there with her. And I had learned the city, and I could leave and walk anywhere I wanted to walk, because I learned which way to go and which way not to go. And someone told me about this lady wanted somebody to work at her house, and gave me the phone number, and I called her. And she told me where she lived and how to get there. And she said, and I'll be waiting because I want to meet you. And I went and had the interview, and the lady hired me. And she said, just to straighten up, to keep the house straight. And then she didn't say anything about cooking. But then one Saturday morning, she asked me, could I cook? And I said, yes, I can cook. And she said, well, oh, that's good to know. She said, my husband wants some country fried chicken and candied yams, and he wants some turnip greens and some buttermilk cornbread for tomorrow's dinner, which was been on Sunday. She said, can you fix all that? I said, watch me. I got in that kitchen, and while I was preparing the dinner, they were getting ready to go to church. Mm-hmm. They went on to church. And when they came back, I had the table set correctly, and I learned that from my mother. Mm-hmm. And I had the chicken seasoned and everything, but ready to go in the skillet to fry. Had the turnip greens cooked, the cornbread was made, the canned yams were made, and all I had to do was fry the chicken. So they came in, and I was frying that chicken. I said, ooh, that's smelling so good. I said, oh, it's all good, And they were very satisfied at anything that I cooked. And one Sunday, the husband asked me, said, Gladys, you're over there on the campus. Said, do you think you could find me a young lady that will clean up my office? Said, the lady that's been cleaning it has to put the job down because she has had major surgery and she can't do that heavy mopping.
Now, when you were cooking for them on Sundays, you were there all day, so you missed church. Like, what did you do about missing church?
I could go at night. Because, see, we had religious services on the campus.
Oh, okay.
And guess who the speaker was?
Who?
Martin Luther King.
You got to hear Dr. Martin Luther King yourself?
Martin Luther King, I heard him speak many times. And we would get together and go down to Dexter Avenue Church at night to hear him. He was an excellent speaker.
Well, at the time that you were hearing him, was he talking about organizing and becoming a more united America, or was he just preaching?
Well, he was just preaching from the Bible.
Okay.
Because they didn't do all this political stuff during that time. They started that after I left.
Oh,
And that
okay.
bus boycott, they did that in December of '55, and I had already come back to Pensacola at that time.
Oh, okay.
But oh, that man, honey, he could speak. I'm telling you, all the kids were crazy about him, and he would come over to campus and walk around and talk to the students who were sitting on the grass and whatever. And
he was close to your age, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was a young man then, very young man. And but that doctor hired me because he kept.
Oh, he hired you to clean the office?
Yeah, the office, but he was telling me about the type of person that he wanted, and he said he didn't want anybody who was on drugs, or because they have all those samples of all kinds of drugs in there. And he said, "Do you think you could find somebody that's trustworthy?" I said, "Oh, yes." I said, "The person that I'm thinking of is very trustworthy." He said, "What is her name?" I said, "Doctor, I'm that person." He reached in his pocket and took the key to the office off of his key ring and handed it to me.
Wow.
And said, "You have the job." He said, "I don't know how you're going to keep all these things going." Said, "But you got the job. That's up to you to figure it out." And I started cleaning. I would clean. And he was complimenting on, how clean it was. And he started telling other doctor friends how well I was cleaning his office. So then they wanted me to work for them. And I got 2 more. Well, that was too much. So I said, well, I got to find me somebody that I can trust to help me,
Yeah.
And I found this girl, and I put me a sign under the big oak tree on Alabama State campus, and I sat down on the bench under the tree, and I said on the sign, "Interviews conducted here."
Oh.
And they were coming and lining up. And I would ask questions. I said, well, now, I can come on pretty strong. If you can't follow direction, I need somebody that can follow direction. I need somebody that's going to be honest, because you're going to be working in the doctor's office. You didn't bring anything in there, and you're not going to take anything out.
Yeah.
And I went on and on. And so some of them said, well, I don't know. And I got to walk there. I said, yeah, you can catch the bus, but it's in walking distance. And so here come this girl. I started interviewing her. She says, "I can do it. I can." She just kept telling me, "I can do it. I want that job, because mama and them don't have no money to send me, and I want to make some money on my own." And I just listened to her.
Right.
And I hired her. And you talking about a girl could work. And whatever I told her to do, she would do extra, just go beyond the call of duty. And I hired that girl, and we got along with each other and everything. So, okay, we get 2 more offices to clean, and I had to hire another person. And
How did you acquire more offices to clean?
Because these doctors were talking to each other, and they was talking about how well these college girls were cleaning up,
Yeah.
And
now, this is something that just pops in my head. Nowadays, we hear a lot about powerful men approaching women in an inappropriate way. Did you have to deal with any of that?
I didn't have to deal with any of that.
That's awesome.
Now,
back then, they were very respectful.
But my mother did that type of work too, and she would tell me that, what to do. Says, now you might not never come in contact with anybody like that. So, but if you do, don't panic and act like you're afraid.
Right.
So, because they will prey on that, so you just talk to them normal, a normal tone of voice, and say, and just tell them that you weren't interested, and you had never done anything like that, and you didn't want to get involved in anything like that. And so I said, well, all right, if I ever have that problem, I don't know what to do. But I never ran into that. And so me and those girls just cleaned, and honey, when our school was out, I stayed there with them until I was a senior and I was fixing to graduate. And I had this first girl that I hired, I told her, I said, well, I want you to take over. And you be the boss lady. Because see, I was working right along with them.
Right.
And one day it dawned on me, said, well, now, you know, you are working at the house, you got all these classes, and you're about to work yourself to death. Why don't you slow down and just let these girls do that work? Because you are the CEO now, you know? And I said, yeah, I'm the CEO. I don't have to be doing all this. So I just stayed at that house and do the cooking and whatever cleaning that she wanted me to do, and let those girls do the cleaning at all those offices. Well, I would go up there, but they would be doing the work, and if I see something that needs a little extra cleaning, you know, I'd point that out, because I'm the boss lady now. Oh. And those girls, I would treat them just like they were my sisters. Right. And I would tell them about saving their money. I said, now when I get paid, you all will get paid. I said, but don't rush and you want to spend up every dime that you get because you want another new outfit when you already got some that you haven't put on. I said, just save your money so when Mom and them late with your tuition, you could go and get your money out the bank and pay your tuition. If you don't have all of it, they will let you pay on it. Right. And oh, girl, I've never had no money of my own, and I got to spend this money. I said, well, it's up to you what you do with it. But I was just trying to tell you how to hold on to something, you know. Because, and I said, well, I went and opened up me a bank account in downtown Montgomery. And when I paid those girls off, and when I got paid, I put my money in that bank. So when I was a senior and time came for graduation, I went and got that money. I paid for my robe. I bought we had to have black dresses. I bought my dress. I bought my shoes. And any other fees that I owed, I paid that out. And Mother and them didn't know nothing. My dad wasn't working because the trains was on a strike. Oh. And so I was trying to keep them from having to worry about what they had to do financially, you know. And so I paid all my fees. I went over to the finance office and checked out, because see, they would check you out and see if you owed any money. Right. And if you owed any money, you had to either pay it or you wouldn't get your degree. They'll hold it. And so I paid everything that I owed. I paid my landlady the last month that I owed her and everything. And I packed up my stuff, and the train started running. I said, well, now, I'm not going to wait for Mother and Dad to put in an application for me a free pass to ride the train. I'm just going to pay and get a ticket and come on home. And that's what I did.
So when you graduated, were your family able to come and see that?
No.
Oh, wow.
Because, as I say, he had just gone back to work.
Yeah. And
money was short. And I didn't even tell them when graduation was. Wow. I just did what I knew to do and got myself out of there. And with the morning, I left at night on the train, rode the train all night to Pensacola. I got in here about 8 o'clock that next morning. And my dad had gone to work, and the children were outside, and they saw me getting out the taxi, and they started screaming and hollering. And Mother came to the door and looked out and saw me, and she ran out, and they all was hugging me, and the children were climbing up on me, and Mother had a lily pond in her front yard, and I lost my balance because they were all climbing all over me, and I fell over in there.
Well, Ms. Wicker, we're going to take a commercial break. And I just want to thank you all for watching Hidden Gems. We'll be right back.